What time is it? Let me check my watch. Oh, it's bone o'clock. In olden days, a glimpse of femur was only for morbid dreamers, but you're not alone. Bring anything bones. Two goofy gals with deathly interest go on a skeleton inquest in your headphones. Anything bones.
Hello and welcome to Anything Bones. I'm Sophie Schwartz.
And I'm Katelyn Hart, and I know it. It's not a question.
You've always been a woman of strong conviction.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Anything Bones. This is the podcast where we talk about bones and bone-related topics. So, hi. Sit your ass down.
Take your pelvis and put it somewhere comfortable, won't you?
Or
your ilium and your ischium need to relax.
You can also be moving. I don't care what you do. I just hope you're having fun.
I'm having fun because August is my birthday month.
Yes.
And I have such lovely friends that they send me little gifts, and by little gifts I literally mean very small gifts because I have gotten into Halloween miniatures, and my friend Jackie just sent me these tiny black cats.
Oh my god, they are so small. They take up just the tiniest portion of your palm. You're gonna have to take a nice picture of those bad boys.
Oh, I will. I have a whole picture of my new setup because I got a bunch of stuff, as well as this little health potion bottle that's knocked over.
Cool.
It looks like it's spilling out its little liquid, as well as this tiny book of witchcraft.
A little tiny book with, what is that thing called again?
Pentagram.
That's right. I almost said pentacle, but that's something else.
Yeah, and there's a few other things, so we'll post a pic of my little Halloween miniatures setup, but the Halloween creep is on, y'all.
Yeah, I wish...
We start in August.
I wish that you listeners could have been in the Michaels when Sophie and I went in the Michaels, because it was just a moment of pure joy when Sophie found the Halloween miniature section. It was like a kiosk, I guess I would call it. In the Michaels, and it was just filled to the brim with tiny spooky things, and Sophie just made a beeline for it.
I couldn't stop myself. I kept I felt like I was not being very sanitary because I kept picking things up and examining them kind of close to my masked face, and was just so small. Look at this tiny skull. And they had this bathtub that's a spooky clawfoot bathtub with a slightly green kind of resin fill to it. Chef's kiss. Amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. Anyway, Halloween begins now, everybody. So hold on to your jack-o'-lanterns.
And if you have any spooky topics that you're thinking about this spooky season and you want covered, be sure to submit them either through the Instagram or through our website.
Yeah, this is a big time for us. Also, we're about to be, we're about 2 months away from being a year old, our podcast. Not us,
yeah.
We're older than that. But it's kind of cool that we are coming up on a year. So I guess we've been doing this 10 months right now.
And yeah, honing in on a year and honing in on 50 episodes.
Barreling towards it with breakneck speed.
In our bone carriage with our skeleton horses.
Yeah. And I've got a big vertebrae whip.
Hell yeah. And I have a bone axe.
Okay, this is the cover of our album, I guess, or if anybody is into fan art, that's what I want. Anyway, should we get into our topics for this episode?
Hell yeah, I say as I swing my mighty axe across my shoulders.
Sheathe it and
sit your ass down.
Sit your ass down. Okay, we've agreed that I'm going to go first this week. And it's just because we needed to have an order, not because it's horribly depressing like usual. So kudos to me.
You're not going to get us down today.
My sources for this were Wikipedia, an article from the BBC, Smithsonian Magazine. One source I'm not going to tell you because it gives it all away. Moving on. So I decided to talk today about the life and death and exhumation of Richard III.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Heard of him?
Oh, have I? I think I've told this story on the podcast before that the play Richard III was the first Shakespeare play I saw in person.
That's right.
And I faked diarrhea to get out of continuing to watch it.
Yeah, okay. So I saw one of the Richard plays at one point, and I was looking at the descriptions of the plays because I couldn't remember the name. And I'm pretty sure I saw Richard II.
Was it boring, and was there not a lot of head chopping?
I don't know about that, but it ended with a violent assault. Which one's that?
That's a lot of...
Oh, damn it.
That's a lot of Shakespeare plays, unfortunately.
We might have to cut this part out. Because I don't know jack shit. I was a theater major, but I swear to God, I just don't have the Shakespeare bug at all. I know you do. I just have never it's never clicked for me.
Well, I'll ask Odessa, because she's the scholar I go to if I don't know it. I'm like...
Well, so I'm going to just sort of summarize his greatest achievements, and then we'll get to the bones.
Richard III's greatest hits.
Yes. I mean, most depictions of him are that he's just a total asshole.
That he totally sucks.
Yeah. A lot of portrayals of him, he's like, this is not great, but he's like got a hunchback, or like,
yeah,
something's wrong with his arm is withered away. There's all kinds of shit like that when he is like classically portrayed. He was born in 1452 and died in 1485. He was the King of England and Lord of Ireland, which started on the 26th of June, 1483, until he died 2 years later.
It's a summer king.
Yeah, summer king, exactly. Okay. So he was the last king of the House of York and the last of the Plantagenet dynasty? Damn it.
Plantagenet?
Yeah, is that it? No. Cut this out.
No, you gotta try to say it. Plantagenet?
The last of the Plantagenet dynasty?
I know that's not right.
Damn it.
Future Sophie here. I asked our resident Shakespeare scholar, Odessa Cross, for the correct pronunciation of this word, and this is what she had to say about it.
Plantagenet. Should I say it again like they do in the YouTube videos? Plantagenet. Plantagenet.
So his death in one of the last decisive battles of the War of the Roses kind of marked the end of the Middle Ages in England. Obviously, he's in Shakespeare's play, Richard III, so, big deal. He was made Duke of Gloucester in 1461 after his brother became king, and his brother is Edward IV. Richard gets married to this lady named Anne Neville. That's all I know about her, sorry. So he did some fun shit while his brother was king. And then when his brother dies, he is named Lord Protector for the eldest son of the dead king, who is 12-year-old Edward V.
Oopsie.
Yeah, so he's 12 and is king, unfortunately, or is about to be king. But hold up. Wait a minute. Let me put Richard III in it. So before Edward V could be crowned, his parents' marriage was declared bigamous. Like, what? And invalid. So he's declared illegitimate, and he can't inherit the throne. So then everybody's like, okay, let's give it to Richard.
Of course. Just a coincidence. Just
Yeah.
happenstance. Let's give it to Richard.
Yeah, of course. Richard III becomes king, and then Edward, the 12-year-old, and his younger brother, who are also known as the Princes in the Tower, were never seen again after this time period.
Yeah, that's one of those big mysteries. I don't know how much you're going to go into that.
Very little, because it just sucks.
Oh, it sucks up and down. It's two little boys who disappeared. People saw them, playing in the Tower of London, kind of, for a certain time, and then they just stopped seeing them.
Exactly. They just vanished, and nobody probably will ever know if King Richard was the one that ordered their deaths.
Yeah. Didn't they think that they might have found two bodies that it's possible were the boys?
They have several times over the years, and one of my sources says, it was really weird, it was from Smithsonian Magazine, and they were like, now that Richard III has been reburied, like, who do we dig up next? There are two children's skeletons sealed in an urn at Westminster, and some people think those are the princes in the tower, and I'm like, a sealed urn with that nobody knows what's in there? What's going on? Like...
Wait, a sealed urn with skeletons inside of it?
I know.
How big is the urn?
They gloss over it. I was like, excuse me, what is this?
Yeah, can you double back to the sealed urn with people in it, please?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway.
More research to come on that, probably.
Yeah, I think The Princes in the Tower might be its own story. This is more about Richard, their possible murderer. So there were two major rebellions against Richard when he was king for 2 little years. There was an unsuccessful one that was led by allies of Edward IV and a former ally named Henry Stafford, who was the second Duke of Buckingham. And then, this one's important, in August 1485, Henry Tudor, we might know his name, but hold on, and his uncle, who is another Tudor, they get a bunch of soldiers together and they defeat Richard's army near the Leicestershire town of Market Bosworth. And this is where Richard III dies big time. And he was the last English king to die in battle. Henry Tudor then ascends the throne, and he is Henry VII. So not quite the exciting Henry, but soon.
Soon, very soon.
Okay, so Richard III, king, is dead. Everybody knows this, but it's a little bit unclear what happened to his body at this time. A lot of people thought that he was thrown in the river, which would mean that obviously the body's totally gone. But some people were like, hey, he is probably buried under the remains of this church of Greyfriars, which is in the center of Leicester. And Leicester is spelled Leicester, but it's Leicester. For show.
Okay. I believe you.
I watched some videos about this, and I spent 3 months in London near Leicester Square. Okay, so this is so crazy. So, quote, a team of enthusiasts and historians managed to track the likely area, of his burial. And they also think that they've been able to find a 7th generation descendant of Richard's sister, so that if they find the body, then they have DNA to compare it to. And they find this woman named Joy Ibsen in Canada. She died several years ago, but her son, who is in London, perfect, provides a sample. So they begin an excavation famously in August 2012 in a city council car park, which Americans call a parking lot.
Yeah.
And my source here says, quote, the only open space remaining in the likely area, which quickly identified buildings connected to the church. So they're pretty sure they're in the right place. And they totally are, because within a few days, they find Richard III's bones and everybody's freaking out. So the lead archaeologist on the case, his name is Richard Buckley. He is from the University of Leicester. He told a press conference soon after the bones were discovered and analyzed, quote, "Beyond reasonable doubt, it's Richard." And everybody was like, yes, we're so into this. We've been waiting for this guy forever.
Yeah.
So Buckley says that the grave was like really clumsily dug. It had sloping sides and it was actually too short for the body, and that made like forced his head forward. There was also no coffin or shroud, and the arms were still crossed when they found him, which they thought was an indication that the body was buried with his wrists still tied. They carbon date the bones to between 1455 and 1540, so pretty close. Richard had suffered at least 10 injuries, 8 of which were to the skull around the time of his death. 2 of the wounds were potentially fatal, but they're not really sure which one it was because, I mean, it doesn't matter. They both would have probably killed him instantly or soon after. There were indications of slashes to the face and the side of the head, and this is gross. If you are squeamish, maybe fast forward about 30 seconds. There was evidence of humiliation injuries. So they think that after he died, they stuck a weapon up his butt.
Oh, wow.
And put him over the back of a horse and then took him to the Greyfriars where they just buried him unceremoniously.
Woof.
Yeah.
Well, he did do some fucked shit. And he might be
it's
a
all
murderer,
complicated.
But, I'm not sure if that's the answer.
Yeah. His spine was actually badly curved, which is maybe how some of the descriptions of him as being hunchbacked or something like that maybe came from. He definitely just had scoliosis.
Just some run-of-the-mill scoliosis. Y'all are exaggerating and being mean.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so after a lot of testing, and we find out all this shit, on March 26, 2015, Richard is buried again in a church in, he's buried in Leicester Cathedral. So they also found out, through the years, that he ground his teeth. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Same.
He had parasitic roundworms in his gut at the time of his death. Not great.
Oof.
He also apparently liked to eat peacock, heron, swan, and he liked to drink wine.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How much of him was left?
Well, they say that part, his, quote, banqueting tastes were revealed with isotope analysis of the ribs.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And then the roundworms were just found in, soil samples nearby.
Interesting.
Yeah. So his funeral, or his, real funeral was, a 5-day pageant. And then they made their way to the Leicester Cathedral. After the discovery and sort of during the time of the testing, the Leicester City Council purchases this old school building, which is right next to the car park where Richard III was found. And they're so excited because they want to create this visitor center that will tell the story of Richard III, his life and his death. So they turn what was formerly the Alderman Newton School into the King Richard III Visitor Center, which was publicly opened on the 26th of July, 2014. So even before Richard was reinterred. It had been just sitting empty since 2008 until Leicester City Council came in and turned it into this gorgeous visitor center. And
that's a great use of that building. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my sources was just the website for the visitor center. So I didn't want to say that at the top and give it the fuck away. But it looks really cool. There's a video that I'm going to link to in the sources that kind of gives you a 3-minute in and out about what the visitor center looks like and what it's all about. It's really, really cool looking. You just like walk through and learn about his life and his death and then his discovery and then all the testing and all the stuff that was done to figure out more about him than we knew before. And then you end the tour looking at the spot where his bones were found.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I want to do that.
I want to go here so badly.
I want to go to there. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. Visiting an archaeological site would be
So cool.
just
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Something not in America. Be tight.
Yeah.
Well, that's Richard III, kind of an overview. Hopefully you learned a little something more than you knew before. It's a very well-known story, but I thought it deserved to be covered on the pod.
I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like I knew generally about Richard III, and I knew that he'd been discovered in a car park, as they say.
Mm-hmm. That's
because
the
that was all
headline.
the headline.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was Richard III found in a car park? And it makes it sound like he was sitting in like space F-12, but like that is not the case. But I liked learning about all the injuries he received up to his death, because I feel like that's something I didn't know.
Yeah, he died in battle and was definitely disrespected after his death. Not great, but he wasn't
But how
a
much
good
we
guy
can
either.
learn.
Yeah, but we
Yeah.
found him, and what I didn't really find an answer to was, were there other bodies there? Like, if it's a church, like, is
Yeah.
it just full of bodies? Like, I couldn't really answer that question. But
Did they find any artifacts with him? Like, was he buried with any, like, stuff?
not much. I mean, he died in battle and was unceremoniously thrown in a grave. It wasn't like he was given any respect.
But, I mean, like, maybe his sword or something. I don't know.
I don't-
Shit he had on him at
I
the
don't
time.
think so. I think it all withered away to time.
As we all must.
Oh, God. I had not really a connection to this story, but I studied abroad in London like the year after this happened. So everybody was still kind of abuzz about it. And I learned just a teensy bit about it then and wanted to revisit it. So thank you. Goodbye.
No, thank you. That was very good and kind of on brand or on theme with what I'm going to talk about. Shall I?
Yeah, go for it.
So, kind of on the theme of I am unsuspectingly, but now fully suspectingly, doing a small series I call Dig 'em Up, Get 'em Out, which is some prominent exhumations. Because we love exhumations here on the podcast.
Clearly.
Yeah, and you just did an episode of Dig 'em Up, Get 'em Out yourself. But this is about the cadaver synod. And this is actually something that I talked a little bit about last episode. We're going to talk about the corpse that was put on trial.
Yes.
Okay, so sources for this bad boy are Atlas Obscura, HowStuffWorks.com, Wikipedia, and then an article from JSTOR Daily. Classic. Hey, future Sophie here. Woo! Twice in one episode. You know that's a record breaker. But I'm coming in to tell you that the guy I'm talking about is Pope Formosus, not Pope Formosus. I don't know where I got that T from, but my mouth wanted to say it. So, Formosus, not Fortimus. Please enjoy my story. All right, so the cadaver synod, which is also called the cadaver trial, or in Latin, synodius henerenda, which is the fanciest way to say it, I think. So this is an ecclesiastical trial of Pope Formosus, who at the time of his trial had been dead for 7 months.
Oh, no.
So this trial took place in Rome in January 897. Yes, 897.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it took me a minute to wrap my head around that one. I was like, 18? Nope. 897.
Wow.
897.
What a small year.
Yeah, but big stuff was happening,
Oh, yes.
believe
Of
me.
course.
because this was like one of the most corrupt and unstable times for like the papacy. Like the church governments were incredibly unstable at this time, and it was actually referred to as a pornocracy, which is a phrase for an extremely corrupt government where they're basically, this is crude to say, but they're whoring themselves out for power. They're ready to be bought, and they don't give a shit about the people. Sound familiar?
Oh, no.
No.
America's
Never.
perfect.
Who said America?
Sorry.
So the Western Empire of Charlemagne had united at this time and also then fell apart into some smaller factions. And then after Charlemagne's death, it was fractured even further into kind of three main branches belonging to Charlemagne's grandsons, and they have great names. We have Louis the German, Charles the Bald, and Lothar!
He doesn't have a title?
No, he's Lothar.
Oh my god! I love them! Why is only one of them German?
I don't know, but one of them's bald.
Oh no, that's so funny.
Yeah, it's very, what are the Schuyler sisters? Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy.
Yeah, oh yeah. Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy.
And Lothar.
Yes, exactly.
So these branches then continue to divide, and all of these little fiefdoms are kind of looking at Rome going, hey Rome, I like what you got. You look like you could be sacked, probably pretty easily, and maybe someone else had done it before in 846. And Rome is still recovering from that sacking, that previous sacking, but they're pretty worried that people are going to come in and start trying to take Rome. And sort of immediately connected with that, rifts are forming within the church because there's a lot of dudes who want to be pope at this time. Because not only does pope give you papal power, it also has a lot of secular power attached to it as well, and you need the support of secular leaders to achieve it. So this is where we get sort of these corruptions, because like the papal elections were very much manipulated to the favor of noble factions. So at the time, like, bishops were elected by, like, local clergy with, like, the approval of, like, the general public. But that also meant that, like, local families of wealth had a lot of influence on who got to hold certain papal offices. And that included the office of Pope, which was also the Bishop of Rome. You see where it starts to get bogged down in a lot of, like, complicated political stuff.
Yeah, it's gross.
It's gross. And at this time, Formosus was a bishop of Porto, which is like a Roman suburb. And this source specifies not the city in Portugal. So I would like you all to know, if you were thinking that, you're wrong. I was like, oh, Porto, the city in Portugal? No. No one thought that but you, writer. Formosus was also like a very successful missionary. He was known for going out and spreading Catholicism through like the Bulgar kingdom. And he, in this sense, might have been a little like too enthusiastic about spreading the old Catholicism, because Pope John the Eighth was like, Formosus, I'm accusing you of violating a law that prevents bishops from ruling over more than one place at a time. And this was a law that was supposed to prevent bishops from building up their own kingdoms, basically. Like, prevent bishops from becoming kings, basically. You know what I mean? And so John accuses Formosus of breaking these laws, and also accuses him of another recent law that they put out, which is like openly wanting to be pope. Like, the thing is, like, you could want to be pope, but you couldn't tell people, and you couldn't, like, run an open campaign of, like, I would like to be Pope, please. You just, like, had to be like, oh, me, Pope? I couldn't. No. Okay.
It's so passive aggressive.
Yeah. And to that end, John did something super passive-aggressive, Pope John. He excommunicated Formosus in 876.
Just
he was
for wanting to become Pope?
Yeah, and from, like, amassing a lot of wealth, you know,
Okay.
which was, like, frowned upon in this area, even though everyone was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So the charges against Formosus, like we said, were an attempt to become Bishop of Bulgaria, being a traitor to Charles the Bald, who Formosus was, like, not a big fan of, and that he had coveted the papacy. So, like, that he wanted to be Pope. So luckily for our friend Formosus, his John VIII problems were solved when he was assassinated in 882.
Nice. Thank you, assassin.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, he was the first pope to be murdered by his own people. Isn't that fun?
Yes.
He was first poisoned, and then the poisoner lost their patience waiting for the poison to happen, so they just bashed his head in with a hammer.
Great. Thanks.
And then, so after this, there is what I like to call a carnival of popes, because there are just a lot in quick succession. But skipping over a couple of those, which I'll go over in a minute, finally, in 891, it was Formosus's fucking time to shine. He manages to be Pope for about 5 years, which is saying a lot in this time.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of stuff going on, and he ends up dying of a stroke. And so then after that, we have Pope Boniface the Sixth, and he was elected to, like, quell these riots that were going on. And he was kind of a bad choice because he had been accused of immoral conduct. And he had been disfrocked twice, but he only ended up being Pope for about 15 days before he also died of either being poisoned or gout.
Wow.
We're not sure. But next up is the important Pope. This is Pope Stephen the Sixth. And Stephen was like, okay, now that I'm Pope, I have some stuff I want to do. Thing number one that I want to do is revisit the crimes of Formosus.
Oh no, the dead guy. He's already very dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's so dead for 7 months. And it kind of wasn't enough for him just to, like, talk shit on Formosus to, like, other papacy people or, like, accuse him of crimes. He went and had his body dug up, dressed in his, like, special, like, Pope robes, and put on a throne to stand trial for all these crimes that we talked about earlier.
Jesus Christ. The lawyer's like, what do you think about that? It's just nothing.
And it's just a dead guy. He's just sitting there. There's a lot of reasons for why he's doing this, why he would dig up a corpse and put it on trial, because it sounds insane to me. Does it sound insane to you?
Yeah, definitely. There's no point because he's gone.
Yeah, but, like, so this was sort of supposed to curry him some political favor among the people who didn't like Formosus, but it was also to cover up the fact that there was a rule about bishops that you could not be bishop of more than one place at a time, right? Because you couldn't amass too much power. Stephen had become Bishop of Rome, a title that comes with the papacy, while he still held a different bishop post. So, what he's accusing Formosus of is actually something he did. But if he can prove Formosus guilty, then that annuls his crimes, I guess, is what some of the reasoning is.
That doesn't make sense. So
no,
the guy, if Formosus is found guilty, then I can do whatever I want. This doesn't make sense.
I've been trying to tool this out because it doesn't make a lot of sense. So Stephen would not have been bishop when he was elected pope. So I think what he's trying to do is, okay, if Formosus could be found guilty of the same crime, being simultaneously bishops of two places, his actions would be null, and Stephen would not have been bishop when he was elected pope. That still doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, if they're talking about the same position, maybe it does. If Formosus, it's really muddled.
It's very confusing. But here's that. So this reason doesn't make a lot of sense to us, right? Like this kind of double bishop theory. Although it may make more sense to people who are more familiar with like old-timey papal rules. But this is a reason that makes a lot more sense to me, and this is the reason that was discussed in the JSTOR article, which was another reason that he might have done this was because of the importance of relics in the medieval era. So, like, if you remember, relics are like parts of the dead body of a holy person. So one of the theories is that by putting Formosus on trial, they can disrobe him and stop him from becoming a relic, like take away his holiness. And so by that, kind of killing him again, like giving like more of a spiritual death, like a death to his religious power. Does that make sense? Because that made more sense to me.
Yeah, kind of. Like, if this corpse is found guilty, then we can't use his bones as relics?
Yeah, because all of their power would have been taken away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. It's just hard. It's hard to imagine someone spending this much time on something that there's no point because he's dead.
But it's all about what you believe matters.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's true. It's all about image and yeah. Okay.
So this trial was a bit buck wild.
Yeah.
I want to talk you through some of the stuff that happened in it. So Stephen is reported to have screamed at the corpse a lot during the trial. And they had appointed a deacon to kind of speak for the corpse, but the deacon didn't do a very good job. And also at the end of the trial, the drama was very much heightened because there was an earthquake that shook the basilica that the trial was taking place inside of. So they very much believed that God had had a hand in this trial.
Right.
And so, of course, I think you can guess whether or not he was found guilty.
Oh, I think that he was found guilty because he couldn't defend himself.
Ding, 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 you're correct. He was absolutely found guilty, and he was stripped of his robes, and they cut off the 3 fingers that he used for blessing people. And they basically said all of his blessing, all of his acts, anything that he has performed is null, void, invalid.
Wow.
So if you got a blessing from this guy, sucks to suck.
You can fuck right off.
You can fuck right off, says the church to you.
Okay, yeah.
So they go ahead and they bury him with this. So they're burying him for a second time in a cemetery that was for quote unquote strangers. So it's for people who died there who didn't have any family. So they buried him there. And then Pope Stephen was not happy with that. He was like, not good enough. So they went and they threw him in the Tiber River. Does that sound familiar? What did they think happened to Richard III?
So they buried him for a second time, and then he was like, nope, and dug him up and threw him in the river?
Yeah.
Oh my God, this guy has way too much time on his hands.
I know. Well, he just has a grudge.
So bad. Yeah, I think a lot of people got thrown in the river, unfortunately, it sounds like.
Oh. Yeah, a lot of people got thrown in the river. Fortunately for our guy, he is the unstoppable Formosus. He gets found by a fisherman. And apparently, like the legend goes, that a fisherman, or in some tellings of the legend, a monk, finds the body, gets it out of the water, and then hides it. And then later, Formosus was reburied for a 3rd fucking time.
Wow.
At St. Peter's, and his name was cleared. So at this point, the people of Rome had had enough of Stephen and his bullshit. They were like, enough already. We get it. You don't like him. And so an angry mob actually ended up throwing him in prison, Pope Stephen, and then he was strangled to death in his cell.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Yeah.
This time was so brutal.
Well, like, listen to this. Like, so the next pope, Pope Romanus, so he annulled all the actions of Stephen, but he was overthrown in less than a year. His successor, Pope Theodore II, was only pope for 20 days, and he was the one who managed to rebury Formosus for the third time. And then his successor, John IX, it was John IX that oversaw Formosus's burial. And today you can actually still see there's a monument that lists all the names of the popes that are buried in this St. Peter's Cathedral. And you can see fucking Formosus here. Where is he? I'm sending you a picture of him on the monument. You can see he's kind of in the middle there between Stephen IV and Boniface.
Nice.
So one last little tidbit about this whole thing. So, as I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, my father is a lawyer, and I asked him, I said, Father dearest, if I wanted to sue a corpse, how would I go about doing that? And he said, well, you can't. And I said, well, what if I really want to? And he was like, well, you could sue someone's estate, but you couldn't sue the actual person. He said you can go and throw papers at their grave, but nothing will happen because no court will hear it because the corpse cannot hire someone to defend themselves and they cannot defend themselves in court. So much like our friend Formosus, you're always going to lose when you're a corpse because you can't defend yourself.
Man, that's rough.
How wild is it?
That's crazy.
And like they went through all of those popes because those were the people who picked like the Emperor of Rome at the time. So like the stakes were very high of being pope. Like as soon as you got to be pope, there was a giant target on your back. You know.
Who would want to be pope at that time? Like it's just so
not me.
Rough. Wow.
Yeah. But that's what I got for a corpse trial. On episode 2 of Dig 'em Up, Get 'em Out.
Yeah, I think we'll be hearing about a lot more exhumations.
Yeah, definitely. I'm chock full of them. I love when you gotta dig someone up. It's always extreme circumstances. You never do it just 'cause.
That's 100% true. There's usually a good reason. Which I think...
You're never like walking down the lane like, I think we'll exhume Sandy today.
You know, I think that's healthy. I think boundaries are good.
I think so too. But speaking of boundaries, we are reaching the boundary of this podcast.
All right. Sounds good.
Make sure to hop on to the Instagram to see pictures from this episode. My tiny miniatures will be up there.
Yes, definitely. We're going to post some miniatures. Thanks for listening to our cute little episode today. We love you guys. Ready, Soph?
Oh, I'm ready.
1, 2, 3. Bon voyage! Goodbye.
Bye. Love you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Anything Bones. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Anything Bones Podcast, or email us at anythingbonespodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to Nick Kruger for our spooky music and Stephen Vetteroff
At Chubby Scrubby on Twitter.
for our jazzy vocals, and thank you to Camilla Franklin
At Camilla Strader on Instagram.
for our beautiful bony artwork. Please rate, review, and subscribe.
He doesn't have a title?
No, he's Lothar.
Oh my god! I love them! Why is only one of them German?